Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Podolskiy Method podcast. I'm your creator and host, Coach Ilya. I'm a certified public accountant, a level 4 certified USA hockey coach, and a lead hockey instructor for the Junior Rangers. And I run a skate sharpening shop called Sharp Skate New York out here in Brooklyn. I want to remind everybody that the show is brought to you guys by Wargate Hockey. Get 10% off with the coupon 10 Podolsky. That's 10 Podolsky. And they have some great cages for your face shields for those hockey players. And don't forget my friends at Howie's Hockey for any tape or any accessory needs that you may want from Howie's. They're wonderful. You can find them everywhere. Again, 10% off with the code Podolsky10. And today I have an extremely special guest. And thanks to Ron for connecting us. Just before I introduce my guest, just want to remind everybody to check out this wonderful book Ron sent to me, Profit First. It's a great read. I just started, but it's absolutely amazing. It's all about creating a transforming your business from a cash eating mindset to a money making machine. So I love the premise already. So today I have Jr. Tolver with me, and Gr is a NFL player. He's a sport analyst, entrepreneur. He was a director for a youth athletic program. He's a coach. So many things. So Jr. Maybe I kick it over to you and just introduce yourself to the folks and tell them who you are.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, man. Hello, everybody. My name is J.R. Tolver. I am a San Diego State alum, an NFL alum. I was drafted by the Dolphins in 2003 and got a chance to live out a lifelong dream of playing professional football. I was able to do that from 2003 to 2008. Played for three different teams: the Miami Dolphins, Carolina Panthers, and the Dallas Cowboys. Right after I left the league, I became a football coach, a high school football coach at a small private school in Newport Beach. Did that for 6 years. And my love for coaching and entrepreneurship has kind of pushed me over the last 10 years or so into full time entrepreneurship. So I live out in San Diego, have a wife and three kids, two boys and a girl. And yeah, man, just riding the wave of where I am today in my life. So
That's awesome. So my first question is very similar usually, which is just if you could talk a little bit about growing up and what made you love football. Why did you fall in love with the game and why you chose that game?
what's funny, man, is I come from a football family. So my dad was a phenomenal football player, high school football player. Didn't have the opportunity to play in college or pro because he had some things come up in his family life. He ended up joining the military. But as a result, as a kid, every Saturday was dedicated to college football. Every Sunday was dedicated to pro football. And I loved it, man. I probably loved just spending that time with my dad, and kind of fell in love with the game as a result. And I tell people this all the time. I remember sitting with my dad when I was 6 years old, watching the Super Bowl. It was the Redskins versus the Broncos playing in the Super Bowl, and my dad was like so fired up about a black quarterback playing in and winning the Super Bowl, first time ever. And I just remember that like it was yesterday. And that was the moment that I kind of thought, like, you know what, I want to play in the National Football League. So yeah, come from a football family, and that's kind of how it all got started.
That's amazing. I talk quite a bit on the show about how generational sport is, how often we end up playing the game that our parents played or our brothers played. Like I've done a lot of martial arts primarily because of my brother because he was into martial arts, and then hockey was kind of, um, somewhat of a secondary sport for me, along martial arts. But I've always loved the game, and so now my kids playing and me coaching them. you know, does exactly what you're describing now with your dad, right? I hope that's the experience they're gonna describe in 10 years
Yeah,
or 20 years.
absolutely. You know what though? The one thing I can say about my dad was it, I fell in love with the game because he loved it, not because he pushed me into it. And I think that's one of the things that probably is one of the big reasons why I stuck with it and committed to it for as long as I did, because it was always about me and what I wanted. Now, my dad was there to support me, he was there to push me, he was there to help me, but he never was pushing me into the game. It was a decision that I made for myself. Um, so that's kind of one of the things I tell my kids is I'll expose you to as many things as I possibly can, but when your light bulb goes off, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, so I understand you've been playing football since very young age. So one question that sometimes comes up is about when do you know you got it? Like when at what point did you know like you're gonna go to the NFL or you're gonna go pro?
I it's an interesting question, man. I think I knew early on that I was better than most. Um, and not that I was bigger or faster or stronger than everybody, because I wasn't, but I just felt like I was a better football player than most of the people that I played against. Just being in the front yard playing football with friends, right? The ability to not get tackled on the concrete. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's just like I don't know. I just had this feeling that this is something that I was good at, that I was above average good at. Um, but I think the nature of the game is you're either a freak in terms of your stature, right? You're either really big, really fast, or really strong, and that can separate you, or you're good at the game and you work really hard at it. And maybe some of those things, as far as like size, speed, and strength, you're not off the charts, but because you're good and you're working, you can hold your own. And that's kind of who I became to be, because I was a small kid. I mean, I didn't grow really until the summer of my sophomore year. So going into my junior year, I graduated high school at 174 pounds. So I was never big, but again, that piece of the puzzle of knowing that I was good at the game and that I can just continue to work my way into being better was kind of the path that I was on.
That's funny you mentioned that because I wrestled in high school at a weight class of 135. I was 135 pounds. Just putting that in perspective. When I started dating my wife in 2 years, I think I went to 185. She made it. She always jokes around about it because she says she made a man out of me, and I can't argue because her and her mom with her
Yeah,
wonderful cooking. So,
that is hilarious.
speaking of whom, she has a question for you. She's asking, did your parents inspire that kind of confidence in you?
um, my parents, it's funny when I talk about this because I try not to like get emotional about it, right? But my parents never told me I couldn't do something. So to me, like that's the most powerful gift you can give to your kid, right? Is to believe in your kid in a way that your reality doesn't become their reality. Like my mom and dad didn't graduate from college. My dad didn't play in college. He didn't play in the NFL. But when I told my dad that I wanted to play in the NFL, he said, "All right, like make it happen." Right? And I feel like that has a lot to do with why I believe I can like create things that haven't been created, or do things that haven't been done. Is because my parents never really got in the way and said, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," or maybe you should consider this, or the odds are again. They never did that, right? If I declared that um, I wanted something, they encouraged me to chase it. So
That's
yeah, I
amazing.
think in a roundabout way, my confidence did come from them. Not necessarily them putting the battery in the back and telling me I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, but for them encouraging me to do the things that I wanted to do and supporting me along the way.
No, that's amazing. I think that that's so important. I grew up, I came to the United States from Russia, and when I was a young boy, I was 11, and my dad never came, so I didn't have that exposure. So I kind of grew up amongst with my brother, and mostly female upbringing with my mom and my grandma and my aunt, and so coming up that way, like I've gotten a lot of my cues and takes from my coaches and from my peers, from my teammates and guys who I played with or wrestled with or did martial arts with. So it's a little bit different, but I think that support system and creating that support system and separating that, you know, from separating yourself from your kid and supporting them rather than pushing your own agenda onto a kid is something that a lot of parents struggle with.
Yeah, for sure.
So
And kids are very like their imagination is their reality, right? So like if I come to my son or my daughter and I give them my perspective on what they're thinking or what they believe they want to do or what's impossible, then I'm kind of limiting them, right? Because God created us all differently. I think He created us in His likeness for a purpose that's designed, for His glory. And so it's not up to me to tell you or my kids or anybody uh, who they can be and who they can't be. I think I've been put in my kids' life, and my parents were put in my life to say, I'm here to support you. I'm here to protect you. I'm here to correct you when you need to be corrected. But at the end of the day, you got to stand on your own too, and that means making the decisions of what you want to commit to. And that's what I did. I decided to commit to this game at a very early age through the tears and the losing seasons and the injuries and the moving and all that stuff. I just made the decision that I was going to give my all to this game, and whatever happened from there happened from there.
So, Gr, when you, I guess, when coming up as an athlete, and obviously you had many coaches in your life, getting to the pro level and becoming a coach yourself. What was, I guess, your favorite coaching experience from a coach's perspective?
Yeah, my favorite coaching experience came from my high school football coach, Chris Thompson, who tragically passed away this year in the middle of football season for my high school. It was a huge blow to me and to this community, the people that he was able to kind of inspire. But it was really just those real conversations, right? Like, Coach Thompson would tell me things that would stick. He would tell me. I remember, he said, "JR, you got to be careful that your biggest strength isn't your biggest weakness, right? Like, you have this very like cool, calm, collected demeanor, and that's good in some situations, but in other situations, people might look at you and say like you don't care. So you need to be cognizant of both of those things. And again, it's one thing how you feel, it's another thing about how people perceive you. And when you're a leader or you're on a stage, you can't just ignore how people are taking in your energy. So, I think from a coaching perspective, that was really one of the most powerful relationships that I've ever had. And somebody who's inspired me, to this day, not only to be as good as I could be on the field, but again, to continue to strive for big things off the field, right? Like life doesn't stop when they turn the lights out. So how do you transition, that energy, that effort, that passion into something else that can potentially have a big impact on the world. So yeah, that's probably my biggest influence was from Coach Thompson and the way that he was just always brutally honest with me in terms of, who I was as an athlete, where I was succeeding, where I was failing, and what I was striving for.
So when you became a coach yourself, did you kind of try to embody that perspective and teach that as well? Or did you have your own take on things?
No, absolutely, man. I think the biggest thing for me was to make sure that the guys that I coached understood two things: um, the success of our team depended upon their individual effort, but also the collective effort of the team, right? And so my whole thing with the guys that I always coach was, you know, don't be an asshole. Like, and that means like make sure that you understand that you are a part of this and your role, your effort is a part of this, but also you're a piece of the big picture. So I know it's a little bit of a juggling act, but first and foremost, you got to take care of you and your responsibilities to the team. And secondly, you have to remember that your energy and effort is a piece of the success of the team, and it's never bigger or less than the team, right? So, being on a team, being in a community, being in an ecosystem, understanding, how my actions affect somebody else. That was really how I approached coaching. Because again, once you leave my field, you're going to join another team. You're going to go into the classroom. You're going to be in a group project. Once you graduate from school, you're going to get a job. You're going to be on somebody else's team, right? So, again, acknowledging that my individual effort is going to impact the team, but no one person is ever bigger than the team, was something that I stressed as a coach as often as I could.
So let me ask you a question about, I guess, game time or being the starter versus being a backup, right? Or sitting on the bench. Because I know as athletes we all go through that where you're not the first guy to go out on the field or on the mat or on the ice. And how did you deal with that personally, and how did you teach the kids to deal with that frustration?
It's tough, man. And if I'll be honest with you, I would be lying if I said I did it great as a player. Because it's hard, right? The goal, again, is to contribute. And it's hard to contribute if somebody is in front of you and they're playing and you're not, right? But again, going back to this idea of like, I'm only a piece of the team. So what's my role? What's my responsibility? Taking pride in that. And if that means that I'm on the bench, then how do I take pride in my role and my responsibility of being a second stringer as opposed to being a starter? Um, Anybody can appreciate their role as a starter. Anybody, right? But I think that athletes mentally are really made when they respond to how they are when they're not playing, when you're a backup or when you're a third stringer. Because as you know, anything could happen at any given time, right? So it takes a very unselfish person to keep himself ready, not knowing if he's ever going to get the opportunity to play. But again, that's a team mentality, right? I'm going to stay ready because if my team does need me, it won't be my fault why we lose this game, right?
Right.
And so I think that as a freshman in college, I struggled. I struggled with that, not playing for the first time, not being a starter for the first time. Um, going through some injuries, changing positions. There's just a lot of stuff going on for me the year that I did have to sit out as a non-starter. Um, but again, it's impossible to not give the credit to how much energy and effort needs to be invested in being a backup. Like
Right.
it really, really, really does. If you're not playing, the energy and the effort it takes to be a quality backup, to still be a kick-ass member to your team, and to also still put yourself in position to be ready when your number and name is called, takes a lot of effort, and it's definitely not easy.
Yeah, yeah. I think I had Ron Duguay on the show. He's a retired NHL player as well, and so he mentioned something to me on the show that he said that usually the best coaches come from guys who didn't have it easy. So guys who struggled because they had to work to outwork somebody else. So they had to earn their spots. They had to earn their moments, right? As opposed to somebody who was naturally gifted, big, tall, strong, fast, whatever, and they had
Right.
to maybe do less to get there. And then those guys usually didn't know how to teach somebody else how to get there because they just didn't go through that experience.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And you see that all the time. Some of the best coaches that we see are guys who had very average careers. But you're right. They spent a lot of time in the books. They spent a lot of time observing and, using that energy and effort from that observation and that studying usually puts you in a good position as far as being able to teach and communicate. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Some of the guys who are the best coaches were the guys who not weren't necessarily the best players.
so that's speaking of coaching, when you became a coach, how different was that? How was that transition from being a pro player to now coaching these young kids in high school?
Bro, it was listen, I didn't even think about it, right? Like I honestly thought that coaching and playing were like the exact same thing. When I went from being a football player to a football coach, I was still coming out on the field with my cleats on and thinking about it as a player. But man, it's totally different, right? Because now you're responsible for organizing all of the moving parts. Like me having to sit down and when you're a player, you get on the bus and they give you an itinerary,
Right.
right? And they're like, hey, the plane takes off here. This is when dinner's coming. This is when meetings are. This is when games, blah, 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 right? And you sit down on the bus and you just read the itinerary and you're like, all right, boom, I got my game plan. When you're a coach, you got to create the itinerary. And
Right.
it's like little stuff like that for me was like, I didn't even think about it. I really didn't. I just thought that being a coach was communicating what I learned from the game to the players, putting the players in position to do some of the things that I had been able to do. But no, man, coaching is totally, totally different. And it takes a different skill set, a different mindset, a different mentality, a different vision. As a coach, you're looking 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks down the road. As a player, you're looking one play at a time, right? So there's just so many different things as it pertains to coaching and playing. And in full transparency, I did not know until I jumped in and started coaching.
That's such a great point. I love it because I have the same, very similar experience. I still skate and play recreationally, maybe 3 4 times a week. I try to get on the ice and skate and continue to play the game because I just love doing it. Obviously, with a smaller, more intimate group of friends,
Right.
but it's very different. There was a moment when we were on the bench with older guys, and you forget, and you're like, "Come on, man, you gotta pass that puck." Blah, blah, blah. They're like, "Dude, I'm not six. Like, what's up with you?" I was like, "Oh no, sorry, wrong bench."
Wrong guy.
Forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so definitely happened. So I know that, like, with transitioning from being a player into the coach, and then we'll talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial aspects and things like that. But I think one thing that I always see people struggling with is the importance of performance versus character. And I think sometimes those things don't actually go in parallel. So I want to get your opinion on that. What's more important, character or performance building?
Yeah, man. What's crazy is that I forgot who said it. I think it's John Wooden said, uh, your reputation is who people think you are, character is who you really are, right? And there's something to be said about that. Because you're right. Performance, what people see is who they think you are, right? Your character is really like how you prepare. like how you dedicate yourself to the game, what you're doing when nobody's watching, and one doesn't necessarily influence the other. Now, influence is probably not the right word. Like one is not the result of the other,
Right.
right? So if you got great character, that doesn't mean that you're going to go out and perform well. And if you don't have great character, it doesn't mean that you're not going to go out and perform well. But I think at the end of the day, the people who separate themselves in the long run, character and performance are pretty matched up, right? We look at like a Tom Brady. We haven't really started hearing about Tom Brady's routine until recently, like the last 3 or 4 years, where people are starting to be like, man, this dude is like 100 years old and he's still out here throwing the ball like a 17-year-old. Tom, what do you do? But Tom Brady's been the same person since he came into the NFL. I mean, if you look at what he's done, he's decided that he's going to treat his body in a way that it allows him to maximize his output. That's a character thing, right? It's very easy to go out and, drink or do whatever. But Tom has made a commitment to himself that he's going to do everything that he needs to do to make sure that his body gives him the output that he wants. So like you read stuff like Tom Brady's never eaten a strawberry because he doesn't believe in, the way strawberries are, raised and what that puts into the body and what it does. Right. So it's like, to me, character and performance in the beginning, you may not be able to find a correlation, but over time, the people who are consistent, the people who turn into Hall of Famers, they usually have something about them that holds them to the code of their performance, and they're able to sustain that high output longer because their character validates and supports their output.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, man. So, what do you think now with all the social media and all that pressure that comes out of that on athletes at every single level, like constant, there's some positivity obviously, but there's a lot of negativity that athletes are hearing nowadays. There are people who just blatantly sit on the internet and just look for people to just go on their, you know, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and just say negative things and bring them down just for whatever reason, right? And so with all that negativity, and especially when you're sometimes having a rough time or a rough week or a rough couple of weeks when things are just not going your way, how do you think that has changed that kind of preparation, that character aspect of the game?
Listen, man, I think every generation that comes through turns around and likes to call the previous generation or the next generation soft, right? Like, oh man, these kids today are they're so soft, and if I would have had this, then I would have been that, and they don't have, you know what I mean? So I feel like that's a piece of the puzzle that's really probably just people in general. But I think the kids today have it harder. Like, I really do. Imagine not being able to not have to imagine being able to have to interact with your rival on a year-round basis. I couldn't imagine it, right? Like,
Like,
Air Mesa High School plays Scripps Ranch High School in football. I see those guys once a year. I may run into them at the Del Mar Fair during the summer, right? So maybe I see them twice a year or 3 times a year. Imagine knowing that the person you're going to play is a Twitter handle away or an Instagram handle away, and the type of self-control you would need to not hate on him or to respond to him hating on you. I think
right.
it's an unbelievable challenge right now for today's athletes, which is why I think it's even more important that these athletes develop a code of conduct sooner than later, because it's very easy, I think, to get sucked down a rabbit hole of everybody else's stuff. Oh, little Johnny is training with this person. That means I need to go out and train, right?
Right.
Or, oh, I saw, little Johnny had three touchdowns, and Lamar Jackson retweeted it. So now I'm trying to up him and do the same thing. I think that establishing a code of conduct, a code of character, uh, creating a system around how you're going to operate as an athlete, and then sticking to it because you know that it's best for you, it's best for your personality, doing your best to eliminate noise, albeit good noise or bad noise, doesn't matter. Too much information is not good ever, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm an athlete today, listen, I give all athletes today props because I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't imagine constantly being tweeted at or being DM'd or being scrutinized in the way that these guys are. Um, and again, the only way I think that I could have overcome that is if I made a promise or a pact with myself to say, hey, this is how I'm going to attack this situation, and then doing my best to stick to it. But no, man, I think today's athlete is the most challenged athlete in the history of sport, just because they have access to everyone and everyone has access to them on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis.
Yeah, no, and I think you brought up a wonderful point about transitioning and building up that kind of character and I would say resilience, right, against such acts and being able just sometimes just there's a saying, right? You look smarter if you don't say anything, right?
Yeah.
So almost like just no need to respond sometimes, just let it go. I know I've learned that in my professional and and personal careers on multiple occasions. So I always try to teach people really nothing, not everything always needs a response.
Yeah,
Sometimes
absolutely.
you have to understand where the person is coming from and why they're doing what they're doing. And other people will try to bring you down because that makes them feel more justified in their choices and what they're doing. And sometimes you just gotta let them have it. It doesn't, no skin of your back, right? Just being a good sport.
Yeah, knowing when to be competitive and knowing when not to be competitive, I think is another thing that when you're talking about transitioning, you got to know what it means to compete, right? Like it's very easy to immerse your passion into winning and losing on everything. But you're right. At the end of the day, sometimes being competitive is a disservice, especially when it comes to things that just don't matter.
Yeah, and we actually have a question coming in here from Christine. Thank you, Christine. What's your advice about giving in to the peer pressure of young athletes to be on social media?
Man, so I think this is where parents come into play. I really do, right? Because uh, kids don't really know about like systems and processes and ways to approach stuff. And I think it's up to us, kind of as parents, to say, let me help you create a plan around this. Let's both agree on the plan, and then I'll hold you accountable to the plan and vice versa, right? Because once you get an athlete to commit to something, I mean, it's a wrap. You're working on his side of the brain. So if you got a kid who is competitive, you know, wants to go out, wants to do well, wants to be as good as they can be, and you tell them, hey, look, let's put a plan in place so that this thing here doesn't take away from what you say your goal is, which is to be the best that you can be at the sport that you compete. Let's make a list of things that can distract us. Let's make a list of things that can take us away from being the best that we can be at the sport that we compete. And then let's shake on it and agree that we're not going to do the things that can take that away. And if you can get an athlete to compete in that way, to buy into a system of I'm only going to do the things, or I'm going to work hard to do the things that make me better, you got them. It's not going to say they're not going to trip up. It's not going to say that they're not going to ever fall into the peer pressure of social media, but they'll be accountable, right? So if I make a mistake, and you hold me accountable to it, I'm going to own it, and I'm going to do my best next time not to make the same mistake again. But I think it does start with parents giving their kids the tool, a framework to really overcome some of this stuff that's easy to engage in, and then just hold them accountable, show them love, show them grace as they try their best not to get tripped over, not to trip over some of these things that are very easy to trip over.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that accountability is really the one thing that sometimes we miss when we're teaching young kids and young athletes, and something that I try to do on the bench a lot of times with when I'm coaching is to teach them to own their mistakes. And a lot of times they'll be like, "Hey, I didn't do that. I didn't. It wasn't me." I was like, "Hey, I saw you. You took a bad penalty. Oh, well." That guy started it, and then we watched the video, and the other guy was just standing there. They're just doing nothing, and you're like, no, he did. Oh, okay, coach. Well, yeah, it was my fault. And I was like, listen, it's like that thing when we talk about, in order to solve a problem, you have to know you have one first. So figure out, take ownership of the mistakes, take ownership of responsibility of issues and things that are happening in the game, and then you can improve it, as such. So, Gerald, when you transitioned from, into your entrepreneurial life, and out of, through coaching and through it, um, how did you maintain and build that resilience and character that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, man, I think it was already built, right? Like the character and the resilience was already built up. It was built up from 20 years of sport. I started playing sports, organized sports, when I was 9 years old. And I finally gracefully bowed out when I was 28, right? So I've been taught how to overcome adversity, how to look defeat in the face and get up the next day and start all over again. Um, how to take in information. I mean, the reality is that there's always somebody who knows more than you and can teach you. So approaching the world as if, not that I know everything, but I'm going to learn something new today from somebody, right? And so I think a lot of those, I know a lot of those skills that I built through sport is what pushed me through a lot of the crappy days in business, right? Because business is a skill in and of its own, and being a great athlete doesn't make you a great businessman. Like I tell people all the time, like today I'm still a baby businessman. I started my first business when I was 28. I'm 41. I mean, I've been in business for 13 years. I'm still a kid, right? I still got a long way to go. And somebody who started business when they were 25 and they're 41, guess what? We're the same age, but they're older than me. They're more mature than me. They have more knowledge than I do. So maybe I can draft off of some of their experience, some of their failures, some of their success that make me better. But I look at this business thing as, man, I'm still a baby, and I've come a long way in 13 years, but there's so much to learn still, and so much opportunity out there, and a lot of more disappointments that I'm sure are going to come and show up, over the next X amount of years of my business career. But that's what sport taught me, man. Just, keep rocking and rolling. There's really no destination. It's not like I'm working to be the Super Bowl champion of business,
Right.
right? And even if you are a Super Bowl champion, you start all over again next year because now you want to be a Super Bowl champion again. So I really believe sport has taught me this infinite mindset of growth and improvement and 1% better, and all the things I think that motivation come from. If you feel like you've made it, what inspires you? What are you motivated for? Why are you getting out of bed? But if you always feel like, man, there's a little bit more I can do, a little bit more I can learn, a little bit more I can overcome, To me, that just keeps me getting up in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's the whole perspective that youths and even pro sports bring, that I think you brought out just now so well, because I think that parents need to, and coaches, and just everybody who is in the sport or is considering to put their kid in this sport should think about that kind of resilience, that building the ability to overcome failure. I always tell the kids, learn to lose before you know how to win. Learn to lose, and before you know how to win, you have to know that. And I keep saying that over and over on this show, and in person to the kids in the locker room. And I'm like, they just, you have to build from the bottom up. You have to learn to get over a loss. You have to do it with grace. You have to do it with proper conduct, and build resilience, and take that into tomorrow, like you said, to be better, to learn something. And I think, if you draw parallels from, taking those lessons, and approaching life with, I want to learn every day mentality, I think those are probably the most successful people that we meet on our road to wherever we're going, right? In
Yeah, straight
sports
up.
and
And
others.
you said something that I think is also important. Eminem has a verse: "Success is my only option. Failure is not. Failure is not an option. Failure is inevitable, right? Like at some point, you are going to fail. So if you believe that success is the only option, I mean, you've already lost. You already lost the game, because at some point you're going to fail. Nobody wins every single time. So I think you're right, man. I think like understanding that, um, you know, we get up every day and we chase success, we chase winning, but we know that it's not promised to us, and that's okay, right? Like
Right.
chase it feverishly, chase it passionately. When you get it, celebrate it. When you don't, man, learn from it.
Right.
And then rock and roll again, right? Like that's the coolest thing I think about me is that, and my path in sports is I don't fear failure. Like not feeling failure is what allows me to chase success. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I am not. My wife will tell you this. I am not
Yeah.
afraid to be wrong. I'm not afraid to put myself out there with a thought that I think I can be right, chase after it and see what happens.
Right.
Like, and that's a sports mentality, right? We don't get onto the field or onto the ice knowing that we're going to win. We get onto the field and the ice knowing we have an opportunity to win.
Right.
And then we chase the opportunity. And if we win, we celebrate. If we don't, we cry, we do whatever we do. But shoot, we show up on the ice again next week, right? And it's
Yeah.
that constant journey of just chasing the opportunity to be successful. And, if it doesn't work out in your favor, cool. Try it again
Yeah.
tomorrow.
That's such that's beautiful, man. I mean, we just had a tournament a couple weeks ago, and my team, we lost. It was 4 games. We lost all 4 games within a goal or two. So it was painful. And we were, playing for third place when we're up 2-0. Ended up losing in the end. Everybody's beat down. We all come in the locker room. Here's what we should have done better. Here's what we did not so good. Blah blah blah. And I turn around and I go, like, okay, well, I have some good news for you. And they're like, what's that, coach? And I said, practice tomorrow. And we got another game next Saturday. I mean, we got 3 practices this week. And
Yep.
we got three more tournaments coming up in 2022. So, let's do it again. Like that's it. Like it didn't go our way. It's all
Yep.
right. We did it.
Absolutely.
We tried it. We did different things. It didn't work. Let's do it again. Let's do something
Let's do
different.
it
There's
again.
just such an athletic thing, man. I hope that people who listen to this podcast and share it, and really get their kids thinking into what sport they want to play: basketball, football, hockey. I don't know, cricket, whatever is out
Right.
there. Find something, because it's that important.
I feel like Nike should change their slogan from "Just do it" to "Just do it again, man." Like,
Right? I love that. If they put that in a commercial, you can sue them now because you
right,
said
right,
it
right, right,
first.
right. Just do it again.
It's time stamped. So, JR, I have a question for you about something we talked about the first time we met and before when we were just planning this podcast, talking about creating a brand around your name as an athlete. So I
Yeah.
wanted to bring it back a little bit to that conversation and how can athletes and then coaches and then as you continue to progress your career post athletic career, how do you build a brand around you? And what was the hardest part for you when you did?
I think the hardest part is the why, right? Like, it's very easy to, you know, identify the why as I want to make money, but that's never a good why. So I think for athletes who want to build a brand, the question is why. Like, why do you want to build a brand? What do you want brand building to do for you? If your first answer is money, go back to the drawing board. Because again, money is never the answer. Money is a byproduct of good work or bad work, depending on how you look at it. Okay. So when it comes to me building a brand, to me it's about impact. What impact do you want to make on the world? And then how are you going to use your brand to impact things that are important to you? Nike sells shoes. We know their brand because of the shoes that they sell. But at the end of the day, Nike provides jobs. Nike, you know, invest in sports and in neighborhoods and in communities. And if you look at and read, Philip Knight's book, you'll see that Nike was way more than about selling shoes and making money, right? It was about building a brand that could impact the stuff that he cared about. And so that's where I would start. I would say, look, if I gave you $1 million, what would you do with it? Like, really think about that question. What would you do with it? And if you say, I'll buy a car, I'll buy a house, I'll do this, I'll do that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. What I'm saying is that there's usually not purpose and passion behind purchasing things, right?
Right.
But if you're telling me like, hey, look, I want $1 million because, I really want to support my community. I want to, help out single mothers. I want to donate to, blah, 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 blah. Now all of a sudden you start digging deep into, the things that you care about, the things that you want to have a positive impact on. And guess what? If you build a brand and that brand leads to you generating revenue, that revenue is going to give you the opportunity to have a positive impact on those whys. So that's where I would start. That's always the hardest place to start too, because when you don't have money, Kanye said it. I always quote rappers. Kanye said it best. Having money isn't everything. Not having it is, right? So it's like, I get it. When you don't have money, the only thing you can really think about is having money so that you can take care of your needs. But if you can force yourself to think 2 or 3 steps outside of that, this whole idea of building a brand will be, I think, much more sustainable for a lot of young guys and girls.
Yeah, no, that's again, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that finding that purpose, right, and it also helps with mental state, right? Because I
Oh, for
think that
sure.
I know so many people who are quite well off financially. They have a house, they have a car, they have pretty much everything they want, maybe even abundance of things, but they're so extremely unhappy. They're so unhappy about because they're missing a purpose. Like they didn't do sports, they don't have a hobby, they don't paint, they don't draw, they don't create, they just kind of go about daily routine, watch Netflix in the evening and have an occasional drink and kind of just flowing through that monotony. you know. And then guys who are, full-time coaches who make no money but love it,
Happy as a clam.
happiest. Yeah. So it's very, very good point. I know you mentioned to me about the five puzzle pieces to structure yourself. So
Yeah.
maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of this conversation that we have a lot about building a brand is how do I position myself to generate revenue? Um, what do I need to do, right? Do I need to build a TikTok following? Do I need to create a logo and print and sell t-shirts? Do people want me to show up at Walmart and sign cards or get my autograph, right? So we kind of skip straight to this idea of, okay, if you're going to build a brand, here's how you make money, right?
Right.
But I think we skip over this fact that if you're going to build a brand and you're going to generate revenue from your name, image, and likeness, that makes you a business. So, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to be a business, right? And I think if you look at businesses, all businesses have the same fundamental things. Um, they have a legal structure, they have a business bank account, they have some sort of bookkeeping mechanism, they have a cash flow plan, how they're going to spend the revenue that they generate, and then they're all trying to figure out how they're going to handle their tax liability, right? So, like to me, if you're an athlete and you are going to pursue revenue from your name, image, and likeness, people are going to pay you, to show up or to sign stuff or to put your logo on a t-shirt and sell it to them. It's very important to know that that money that you generate from that name, image, and likeness, that's not your money. That's the business's money. And how is the business designed to receive and redeploy that money that you generated? If you skip over the foundation, you're going to build your brand building enterprise on quicksand, right? So I'm all about, understanding how to lay a solid, concrete business foundation. So whether you make $100, $100,000, or $100 million, you already set up a system that's going to help you handle that revenue successfully and sustainably.
Yeah, and that's and for all the listeners out there, I take notes on that one. I think that's extremely important because people don't really think, again, in terms of branding themselves. And you don't have to be a professional athlete to be thinking in those terms early on and to be thinking about your purpose and the why, as JR mentioned, just getting an idea of where you want to go. So, JR, how do you now, I know you're insurance agent with State Farm, and you do all these other things. So how do you balance everything with the three kids, with the family, and the second question to complicate that a little bit, do you want your kids to play, to be athletes and potentially pro athletes?
I first question I would say our newly found slogan, just do it again.
Right.
That's how I approach it, right? Like, I jump up in the morning, man, and I have so many ideas, and I get so excited about so many different things and so many different people, and my kids included, right? And it's like I just have to, I just got to put myself out there. Sometimes I take on too much. Again, my wife will tell you that, but I wouldn't have it any other way. My goal really is to impact as much as possible. And I took an organizational leadership class a few years ago out in Green Bay. It's a program called Initiative One, and they make you whittle your purpose down to 2 words. So you go through this 1.5 year class to develop this 2 word purpose. And my 2 word purpose is to facilitate collaboration. So I'm not operating in my purpose if I'm not trying to figure out ways to, bring people together for a greater benefit, right? Um, the second question, yeah, absolutely, man. I would love for my kids to play sports. We're kind of at this point right now where my kids are 9, 8, and 5. So they're at that age where it's not just roll the ball out and have fun and get a snack after the game. We're at that age where I know, even if they don't know, that what they learn in that 2 hours of practice potentially is going to influence and stick with them forever, right? So now I'm trying to figure out what sport do I put them in?
Right.
That's another hard part because, again, I can't make the decision for them. Commitment is a personal decision. And so daddy can take you to play football, but if you're not committed to it, your heart's not in it, you're just waiting until I let you quit. So I'm not trying to recreate that either. So right now we're kind of at this point where we're starting to sprinkle our kids into a few different things. But as soon as I see that gleam in their eye, we're going all in. So I definitely want my kids to play sports, and if they make it to the professional level, awesome. But I know that if my kids at this age find a sport and commit to it at least through high school, man, they're going to be a better human being as a result.
100%. Couldn't agree with you more. So I know we're coming up on the hour here, but I did want to usually, before I end the show, I always ask a few questions from every single viewer. But before I do that, just wanted to again remind everybody to check out the Junior Rangers programming. If you are thinking about introducing hockey to your child's life, the best way to do it is through Junior Rangers. Uh, the link is on your screen, nhl.com/junior/ranger/community/youth hockey, or you could just Google Junior Rangers hockey program and look around for Learn to Play. We're in 40 plus rinks. It's a wonderful program. With under $300, you get to really get the full gear and 10 lessons, and it's a great way to get into the game. Which is something we should probably. One thing that I want to talk to you about right before we finish up was the cost of entering some of the sports. Because I think that has gone up significantly over the years. So what have you seen? From when you started to now in terms of the entry barriers to this game.
Yeah, I think people are starting to get more specialized. When I played sports, we just kind of go from one season to the next. We weren't doing a whole lot of, independent training and things like that. But I think kids today are starting to gravitate more towards kind of that individualized instruction. And yeah, that can create haves and have nots, really, really quickly. So I think it's on businesses, right? Like me, to make sure that we're creating level playing fields in the communities that do business with us, right? The communities that I'm serving as a business, I need to also be giving something back to them. So, I really believe that if you ever get a email or a, GoFundMe from a youth program in your area, don't just, send your little $25 and click the button. As a business owner, I think it's our responsibility to kind of like jump into the community and say, how can we help? Is there something that we can do to maybe level access to people in the community? So that's kind of the way that I look at it. I think that if there were more small businesses in the neighborhoods that we served that kind of really took an intentional approach about leveling the playing field, we would eliminate this idea of the haves and the have-nots, those that can afford it, those that can't afford it, and then obviously leaving kids behind as a result.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. All right, so those promised questions, speed fire. Here we go. First one: your favorite quote or motto that you live by.
Oh man, I think my favorite quote is, "If it's important to you, you'll find a way. If it's not, you'll find an excuse."
Ah,
Um, that sticks with me. It really does. It's something that I live by. Um, yeah, even in business, I get up every day and I say, "This is what I want." but I have to challenge myself and say, well, if that's what you want, then what are you doing? And if you're not doing something that leads to you saying you wanted it, then you don't want it. Like don't make an excuse as to why you don't have something, right? So yeah,
Right.
that's probably my number one there is if it's important, you'll find a way, and if it's not, you'll find an excuse.
That's an awesome one. I love it. Number two, can you share three things that you would suggest that every parent does when raising an athlete?
Um, Number one, I would say talk to your kids. And when I say talk to your kids, I mean talk to them in a way that they talk back to you, not talk at your kids. We're all, as parents, really good at that. But those questions that allow your kids to kind of open up and give you a window and a glimpse into who they are and what they're thinking and what they want. So that would be number one. Number two, again, I'm a big music guy. I'm a big movie guy. My favorite show is The Wire, my favorite show of all time. In The Wire, Omar said, a man has to have a code. I really believe that kids have to have a code as well, right? Like, to me, helping kids understand what it means to operate within a framework, within some rules, within some guidance is a phenomenal way to give them structure, to hold them accountable, to make them mature, to make them good citizens. So yeah, having some sort of code with your kids. And then the last one, man, hug your kids and tell them you love them. Those words are so powerful, and whether your kids respond to it or not, they'll internalize it. So every day I wake up and I hug my kids. I tell them I love them. I tell them I'm proud of them. And I'm really trying to plant those seeds into them that they're worthy, that they matter, the same way that my parents, planted those seeds into me. And it's funny. I tell my daughter all the time, like, Malia, I love you. She's like, I love you too, Daddy. I'm like, no. She's like, I know. I'm like, how you know? She's like, because you tell me all the time, right? And like, so that's a piece of the puzzle that I think is very, very important. Is to tell your kids, to let them know unconditionally that you love them and that you're there for them, and you're okay embarrassing them by letting them know that. So those are kind of my three things, man. I think make your kids talk to you, have some sort of code for your kids that they can work within, rules that they can operate within, and then there's no such thing as too much love and affection when it comes to expressing that to your little crumb snatchers. So
That's awesome, man. I love it. I think that's a common theme now with the conversations and really listening to your kids and maybe even learning from them as well. And so this last question here is, what motivates athletes?
that is a really good question. And if I had to boil it down, I would say the ability to achieve a goal. I really think it's as simple as that. I
Yeah.
think if you put a goal out in front of an athlete and you show them how to get there, that motivates them. Like if you show them a starting point and then a stopping point, and you tell them if you do all this stuff in the middle, you can go from here to here. I think that's really, really motivating, because a lot of times as kids, we can't see into the future. Or maybe we can see into the future, but we don't know the steps, how to get from where we are to where we want to be. So yeah, to me, if you motivating an athlete is all about setting a goal, showing them where they are and showing them how to get from where they are to where they want to be. Um, yeah, I think that's hard for any athlete to not get excited about. Goal setting is, man. I have this State Farm office, and one of the things I love about State Farm is they give us goals every year, right? And it's always at the same time. I just did my year-end goals for 2022. So as much success as I had in 2021, I had a great year in 2021. They already got me looking ahead at my goals for 2022, and I need that, right? As an athlete, like I need to continue to shoot for something. I think you give athletes goals and you show them how to make them come true, you'll motivate the crap out of them.
I love that. That is such a wonderful perspective. And before we call it a night, I did want to just give a shout out to Ron Taharian again for bringing us together. Thank you, Ron. Check out the episode with Ron. I think it was 35 or 36, one of those. So you guys can find it in the podcast. As usual, please share the show. Tell people about us. I think it's a wonderful perspective, and we have some amazing, amazing guests that share infamous wisdom with everybody here. JR, I did want to put up a couple of comments here. You're great, thank you. And one more here. Your insight into sports and how to translate everything you learn into business and making yourself a better person is amazing. Thank you. So a lot of love, a lot of feedback. Thank you guys for listening and commenting here. JR, any last words and maybe let people know where they can find you and connect
Yeah,
with
I
you?
hang out on Twitter, so you can find me JR Tolver 16. Pretty active on LinkedIn as well. Just look me up, JR Tolver. Would love to connect and stay in touch. Hope everybody has a phenomenal holiday season. And yeah, if you got young athletes that are really involved and really care about sports, continue to encourage them to work their butts off and pursue their goals. And they may not make it to the pros, but you'll get a great little human out of it. I can attest to that. So, yeah, appreciate you having me on, Coach, and love to do it again sometime in the future.
Absolutely, man. It's so much fun to have you, and I'm sure there's so many more things we're going to discuss. So I'll definitely look to schedule something after the holiday season again. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you're so busy. And for all the listeners, thank you for staying with us and continuing to support the show. Much, much appreciated. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful night.